We have a new WWE Intercontinental Champion, and it is Bron Breakker. All because Jey Uso would not acknowledge the Tribal Chief, Solo Sikoa, because yes, it was the Bloodline who interfered on this week's edition of WWE Raw to cost Jey the Intercontinental title. Before we jump into that and everything else on this week's edition of Raw, I keep telling you guys, I am on Twitter now. Follow me there at WrestleBlake, having some fun conversations with you guys, WWE related. If you want some nostalgia, share some wrestling history, all that stuff on there. So click on that link in the description below and the pinned comment, and follow me there for more WWE content. But let's talk about what happened on Raw. And of course, we do start with the main event, Bron Breakker defeating Jey Uso to win the Intercontinental Championship once again. And just as we discussed on the SmackDown reaction show last week, and really just as we had discussed many times previously in other videos, they have been setting this up really since Jey won the Intercontinental Championship. And they had been setting up the idea that if Jey was going to return to this Bloodline saga, it was going to cost him a lot. And would it cost him everything? That was the question we had. He was going to have to give up something, if he was going to get back into this thing, because you had to have something to bring him back into it. And so, as we talked about after SmackDown, we said there's two ways they could do this, right? It was either going to be Jey's either going to retain the title because Roman Reigns and Jey Uso are going to come help him, or the Bloodline are simply going to cost him the championship, and that will be what precipitates Jey to go back to SmackDown and join his brothers, Roman Reigns and Jey Uso, in this battle against the Bloodline. And it seems like WWE decided that the latter was the best way to go, and I don't think you can really argue with that. Bron Breakker needs the championship more than Jey Uso does right now, and as I've said before, Jey's reign was never going to be this legendary, long Intercontinental title reign. It didn't need to be. The story was Jey winning the title itself. It wasn't going to be the reign. It was going to be the fact that he was proving that he could do it. And now that he's proven that, it is what it is. I mean, that was really the goal from the start, was for Jey to prove that he could be a force as a single star, win a championship, do this without the Bloodline. And he did that, and now the Bloodline take it away from him. And like we said, was it going to be something where it was going to cost Jey everything? And now maybe it has, because he has a big decision to make, right? What is Jey Uso going to do now after Jacob Fatu, Solo Sikoa, and the Tongans find a way to cost him the title here? And so, if you look at it from that standpoint, that was, again, something that I think was going to happen on this show. We knew there was going to be a big development, and now we wait to see how does this sort of impact the relationship with Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. And we know we're going to get to that probably on SmackDown. Now we know they're also going to be selling the beatdown that they took from the Bloodline on last week's SmackDown. And so, more questions still, and that's the Triple H way. You have more questions than answers. What's next? Like, how do we now get to the next part of the story, and what is Jey going to do now that he does not have the Intercontinental title anymore? Everything that he worked for has been taken away now by the Bloodline, and that is your next step to see how we continue to put these pieces back together with the original Bloodline to get them to the War Games match at Survivor Series. And keep in mind, too, Sami Zayn is still someone who we're waiting to see how he fits into this, was nowhere to be found on this show, right? And so keeping Sami out of it, clearly intentional right now, because Sami, as I've said before, in all honesty, is probably going to be the toughest one to get back into this thing because of what he did to Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble. And so that was such a important visual, right, that you just cannot forget that. And we know Roman Reigns has not forgotten that. So that's going to be the next big thing. After perhaps Jey decides that he doesn't want to do this, he's reluctant, but now he has a reason to go back and fight the Bloodline. He's not doing it for Roman and Jimmy. He's doing it for himself. And so that's a big part of this, I think, and very important because, like we said, you can't just blow through the history with all these guys and everyone just all of a sudden is back on the same page and they're buddy-buddy again. That's not going to happen. These guys are doing it for themselves, right? Roman knows he needs Jimmy. Jimmy knows he needs Jey. And Jey knows that, hey, if I'm going to get this championship back, then maybe I do need these guys, but I'm still doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for them. And I think Sami Zayn's going to be the same way. How does Sami come back into this thing? That's the next big question, I think, that has to be answered once we figure out what Jey does next. But I also want to mention one other thing, because this is not directly related to the Bloodline Jey Uso, but it is related to what WWE loves more than anything I think you could say, maybe outside of money, and that is this. These kind of moments right here, as you see, and you guys know watching this, you heard the crowd. I think back to like Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior back in 1990. There have been others that they've done. Even like if you want to go more recent, the Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill showdown at the Royal Rumble. These are the kind of moments that when you put two stars together and all of a sudden the crowd on their own makes this such a huge moment, you've got something. And that's exactly what happened right here with Jacob Fatu and Bron Breakker. You had the stare down between these two, and all of a sudden the crowd realizes this is what we want. We want these two hosses in a hoss fight. And so I thought this was very, significant here, because this kind of tells you what people think. And of course it is just, you're looking at one arena crowd, right? This is one arena that did this, in that. Like, can you guarantee you're going to get that same reaction in every single arena you go to? Maybe not. But it does tell you that when they tease this interaction here between Jacob Fatu and Bron Breakker, and that's the reaction you get, you've got something special. And this is one of those that really you didn't think about, right? You didn't think about the idea that Bron Breakker and Jacob Fatu was this huge money match, because we've just never seen these two together. But now that you have it in this setting here, where, again, the Bloodline's interfering to cost Jey Uso, but yet Bron Breakker gets involved because, of course, Bron winds up spearing Solo Sikoa here after Jey moves out of the way, and you get this tense interaction between Jacob Fatu and Bron Breakker, and the crowd is eating it up with a spoon. That is what I love, and I know, again, that's what WWE loves. They love to see this kind of stuff when you get these reactions, because that tells you all you need to know. It tells you that this is a match that you are immediately going to put on your list to say, at some point, we have to do this, because the people 100% want this match right here, and you can understand why. These are two badasses who just go out and kick ass. I mean, that's what they do, and so put them together and see what kind of magic you have. And this was such a great tease, because you are going to, at some point now, I'm telling you, we don't know how soon that's going to be, but at some point you have to do Bron Breakker versus Jacob Fatu, because the people told us exactly that they wanted to see it here on this one. And so those are, again, the kind of moments that you really remember. If you're a pro wrestling fan, you can remember so many different ones like that throughout the years. I brought up, Hogan Warrior, and we mentioned the recent one with Bianca and Jade and those kind of things. But this was kind of one that feels a little bit different, because they've been so separate, and you've never thought about kind of the interaction. At least I haven't. I'm sure some people have. But it was very cool, I think, to see the reaction to these two kind of teasing this potential showdown between the hosses here. So, that was something else coming out of this match that I thought was a big positive for WWE, to say the least. So, yes, Bron Breakker, the new Intercontinental Champion, he's going to now carry this belt forward. You don't really need the Intercontinental title on Jey for the Bloodline, War Games or anything like that. And, we could also ask the same question. This relates to SmackDown. I think this also hints at the very likelihood that the Bloodline, the Tongans, are going to lose those tag team championships before we get to War Games. And if the way they're setting it up seems to make the most sense to me, could be to the Motor City Machine Guns. Maybe you want to come in and make a statement right away with Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin. They win this mini tournament here to become the number one contenders, and I think you go all the way with them. I think you have them win the titles, and maybe they're the team that kind of holds the belts for quite a bit in WWE. And so I think that's something certainly to consider. If you're taking the IC belt off Jey, you don't really need the tag team titles on those two right now, unless you decide to go with like a, Jey, Sammy pairing, something like that. But I think that's worth mentioning too. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Tongans were to lose those titles. And then now if they do lose them, you have people, if the Motor City Machine Guns don't beat them straight up, which you could make an argument why they would need to do that. You do have elements like Jey being able to interfere and that kind of stuff. Jey and Jimmy potentially costing them the tag team championships. That's something else you could work with. So something to think about. We'll see if they kind of, lead us in that direction, or if they just decide to keep the titles on the Tongans. But, all right, so that was, again, the biggest part of Raw. I don't think there was anything that really came close in terms of a close second to what took place on this show. It was all about what was going to happen here with this. But one other notable thing we know coming out of it was the fact that we did get the announcement. It is going to be Seth Rollins versus Bronson Reed at Crown Jewel, just as we expected. We're thinking, okay, you got to build your 5-match card for Crown Jewel. This is one that makes a lot of sense because, Bronson Reed took out Seth Rollins. You want to get Rollins back in the rotation here in terms of these high-profile PLE matches. It is Crown Jewel. And so, obviously they're getting paid a lot of money to do this. And so I think that's a match that just makes a lot of sense. And they kept it pretty simple here, right? These two just want to destroy each other. And at every turn, they were trying to find a way to get their hands on the other. Security's having to break it up. And Adam Pearce finally just breaks and says, you know what? Screw this. I'm not doing this anymore. You guys can have your match. That's it. And so, really the chaos type theme here has continued to reign supreme on Raw. And I think that is important because, they really are playing up the fact that anything can happen on Raw. There is chaos at every turn now on this show. And that makes for a pretty unpredictable, 2 hours, I think, in terms of these different segments you're going to get and that kind of stuff. So they really played that up here with Rollins and Reed. And so, no doubt, I think that's a big match because you are talking about, Bronson Reed's been built to this point, as this huge monster. And now you do have Rollins coming back, right? And you expect Seth to get back into the world title picture at some point soon. So it's a big match for both men. And I think, if I had to pick right now, I'd probably pick Seth Rollins to win that match. But look, I mean, if they really want to, again, take this a step further with Bronson Reed, they could do that. But you could also, I think, come out of this with Bronson Reed versus Bron Breakker because you can tell, like, that babyface turn for Bron Breakker is pretty much here at this point. And I think if you go to Breakker versus Bronson Reed, now that's another match that if you want your Haas fights, you're getting it with those two. So I think that's something interesting to think about as potentially a next possibility there on that. But speaking of the world title, you get kind of a mini interaction here between Damian Priest and Gunther. We knew Priest had mentioned before, he's kind of done with the Judgment Day. You guys know I said that after, the last PLE. I'm like, I think Priest has to move on here after Bad Blood. He needs to get back into wanting that championship back, even if he doesn't get it, and I think it's unlikely that he will. But you have to at least let him put that on his mind now because he is the former champion. His goal needs to be getting back that title. It doesn't just need to be playing around with the Judgment Day all the time and trying to get revenge every single day of the year, right? He needs to want that championship back. And so he has that interaction with Gunther telling him that after Crown Jewel, he's going to basically attempt to do that. And we'll see if, that's a direction they go in. Of course, my thought is still I think you could see CM Punk come back and challenge Gunther for the world title at Survivor Series. But I think that it's interesting. Could you do something with Punk and Priest maybe to battle it out to see who's going to get that shot at Gunther? That's something to think about, I think, as well. Rhea Ripley, speaking of Damian Priest here, you had Rhea Ripley come out, try to get a little payback on Liv Morgan, Raquel Rodriguez, and Dominik. So she, comes out and does. And I forgot to mention, too, Dominik also suggested, and Carlito went to Adam Pearce to suggest that Dominik should be the one to get a shot at Gunther, and maybe Dominik's going to take that world title from him. I don't think that's going to happen, but I like the story they're playing with here because Pearce did say that Dominik's going to take on a former world champion next week to maybe get that opportunity. So, I mean, I suppose there are plenty of options you could work with. I mean, Priest is an obvious option, even though you've had that match already. But, I do think it's kind of fun to play around with the idea that Dominik thinks he's going to be the next world champion. He's going to be the one to dethrone Gunther. I would not put my money on that. But at least Dominik has some confidence in himself. But back to him and Rhea Ripley. She did get a little payback here on them. And we know it's really just Rhea continuing to chase after Liv. But now Raquel's kind of that person that's in the way of all this. And so they're definitely, playing with that idea here that it's still for Rhea Ripley about getting this championship back, but she's probably going to have to go through Raquel to do that. So this continues, and I don't know if it's going to be for everybody, but we just know that's where we are right now with this whole story. And so, and that did kind of play into the tag team situation where, of course, they took on Damage Control. You once again had Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend getting involved because they're setting up that match on NXT. So I think that is, kind of where we're at on that as we kind of look at where everything else is going on in the women's division right now. But you still have kind of those central figures and the same ones it's been for a while in terms of, chasing that actual championship. So, so that was, again, notable here. And really the only other, I'm looking at my notes here. Again, I really was Bloodline focused here in terms of the Jey stuff. But You did have the Wyatt Sicks return. They made their return here to go after the Final Testament and The Miz, which, again, if you think about the theme that has been built in, I think it makes sense, right? It does make sense that you're going to have them go after people who have wronged a family or a friend or whatever. And, of course, The Miz and R-Truth. Truth comes back here to try to attack The Miz. You have the Wyatt Sicks come back. So I think, honestly, and I've said this before, this is really all the Wyatt Sicks need to be. Like, they need to have a mission, and we know what it is. Like, they went after Alpha Academy first, and Chad Gable, we know what he had done with his former friends / family in the Alpha Academy. And now, you kind of think about what The Miz has done to Truth. The Final Testament, Karrion Kross is trying to basically break up friends at every turn, whether it's the New Day or someone else. So it does, connect, I think, in terms of the story. And this is what the Wyatt Sicks want to do because they are all about that bond, right, as a family. And so I think it's fine because, it was never going to be a situation where, like I said, I think it makes a lot more sense to not have them out there every single week. You want them to feel special. And once again, what happened? The crowd reacted huge whenever the lights went off and the music hit. And so that's what you want. You want to keep them feeling fresh, I think, and special, and use them in these kind of scenarios where they're not just out here every single week on, in 4 segments or anything like that. Like, they come out when there's a purpose, when there's a reason to come out. And so I like the way they're doing this, actually, with the Wyatt Sicks because if you just have them out there all the time, it's not going to feel special week after week. But in this setting, you can do that because you just bring them out to kind of, get after the people who are wronging their friends or family members. So I like that. And speaking of, we talked about the New Day. They advanced in the tag team tournament, and you also had LWO, Rey Mysterio and Dragon Lee advance too. So that's kind of notable coming out of this, and so we'll continue with that moving forward too. But there you go, guys. There were some quick thoughts on this week's edition of Raw. Like I said, certainly the biggest thing coming out of it is what's going to happen next with Jey Uso and this Bloodline story. What does Jey do on SmackDown? We'll find out. But it should be a lot of fun as we continue this road to not only Crown Jewel, but to Survivor Series as well. So appreciate you guys watching as always. Leave your thoughts on this week's edition of Raw. And as always, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well. I will go ahead and let you know this week's SmackDown reaction show, we may have a little bit later than usual. I may not be able to get that up on Saturday morning. It may be Sunday instead, but I'll keep you guys updated in the community section. So be sure to check that out. You'll get the post in your feed on YouTube, but we may have a little bit of a slight delay on that. And I'll explain to you why after the fact. But we may have a slight delay on Sunday instead of Saturday for our SmackDown reaction show, which we know something big is going to go down with the Bloodline. So I just want you guys to know that up front. So again, guys, appreciate you watching as always. Let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE Raw.